When Erik Menendez took the witness stand in 1993, he said 7 words that stopped the trial cold. "My father raped me since I was 6. The prosecution called it a lie. The defense called it the truth. And America had to decide, was this the ultimate defense strategy or the darkest family secret ever revealed in a courtroom?" September 1993, Los Angeles Superior Courthouse. The Menendez brothers' trial was entering its 3rd month. Lyle and Erik sat at the defense table in suits and ties. They looked like college students, clean-cut, quiet, respectful. The prosecution had spent weeks painting them as cold-blooded killers who murdered their parents for a $14 million inheritance. The evidence seemed overwhelming. They bought the shotguns. They planned the crime. They spent the money lavishly afterward. Open and shut case. But then Leslie Abramson, Erik's defense attorney, stood up. "Your Honor, the defense calls Erik Menendez to the stand." The courtroom tensed. Everyone knew this was the moment. Erik had never spoken publicly about what happened that night. Now he would have to explain everything. Erik walked to the witness stand. His hands were shaking. He was 22 years old. He looked younger. Leslie Abramson began gently. "Erik, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell the jury about your childhood, about your relationship with your father." Erik's voice was barely a whisper. My father started touching me when I was 6 years old." The courtroom froze. "He would take me into his bedroom. He would do things to me. Things I didn't understand. He said it was normal. He said all fathers did this with their sons." Several jury members visibly recoiled. One woman covered her mouth. Prosecutor Pamela Bozanich was already on her feet. "Objection. This is complete." The judge cut her off. "Overruled. The witness may continue." What Erik said next would become the most controversial testimony in American legal history, because it wasn't just about abuse. It was about a family that looked perfect on the outside, but was hiding something monstrous. To understand the Menendez case, you have to understand the family everyone saw. Jose Menendez was the American dream personified. Born in Cuba, fled Castro's revolution at 16, arrived in America with nothing. He worked his way through college, climbed the corporate ladder, became CEO of Live Entertainment. By 1989, he was worth over $14 million. He lived in a Beverly Hills mansion. He drove luxury cars. His sons went to private schools. Kitty Menendez was a former beauty queen. She had married Jose in college and devoted her life to being the perfect wife and mother. She hosted dinner parties. She decorated their homes. She made sure Lyle and Erik had every advantage. From the outside, they were the perfect family. But according to what would emerge at trial, inside that Beverly Hills mansion, something horrific was happening. Erik continued on the witness stand, his voice breaking. "It started when I was 6. My father would take me into his bedroom when my mother was out. He would touch me. He would make me touch him. He told me this was our secret, that if I told anyone, something bad would happen to our family." Leslie Abramson. "Erik, did this continue?" Erik. "Yes, for years. It got worse as I got older. He would rape me. In his bedroom. In his office. Sometimes when my mother was in the next room." The details Erik provided were explicit and disturbing. Court TV had to cut away multiple times. Jury members wept openly. "When did it stop?" Abramson asked. "It never stopped," Erik said. "It was still happening. When I was 17, 18 years old. Right up until we killed him." The prosecution's theory had been simple. Lyle and Erik killed their parents for money. But Erik's testimony presented a completely different motive. They killed their father to stop the abuse, and they killed their mother because she knew and did nothing. But Erik wasn't the only one with a story to tell. When Lyle Menendez took the stand, he dropped an even bigger bombshell. Leslie Abramson, now representing both brothers in testimony. "Lyle, did your father abuse you as well?" Lyle nodded. "Yes, from age 6 to age 8. He did the same things to me that he did to Erik. The touching. When did it stop for you?" "When I was 8, I told him to stop. I fought back, and he did stop, with me. But I found out years later that he just moved on to Erik." This testimony was devastating. Lyle broke down completely. "I knew what he was doing to my little brother, and I didn't stop it. I didn't protect him. That's on me. That's my failure." The courtroom was in shock. Even the prosecution seemed momentarily stunned. But Lyle's testimony revealed something else, a family dynamic built on fear, control, and silence. But the prosecution wasn't buying it, and what they discovered about the brothers' behavior after the murders would seem to contradict everything they claimed. Pamela Bozanich, the lead prosecutor, was known for being tough, and she came at the Menendez brothers with everything she had. Her cross-examination of Erik was brutal. "Mr. Menendez, you claim your father abused you for over a decade, but you never told a teacher, never told a doctor, Never called the police? Erik, I was scared. My father was powerful. No one would have believed me. Bozanic, you were 18 years old when you killed your parents. You could have left. You could have moved out. Why didn't you? Erik, I tried, but my father threatened me. He said if I left, he would kill me. Bozanic, so instead, you killed him first. Erik couldn't answer. Bozanic pressed harder. Mr. Menendez, after you killed your parents, you went on a spending spree. You bought a Porsche, a Rolex. You hired a tennis coach. You spent $700,000 in 2 months. Does that sound like someone who was traumatized and scared? Erik, I know how it looks, but I was in shock. I didn't know how to process what we'd done. Bozanic, or were you celebrating finally getting the inheritance? The prosecution's case was simple. The abuse story was a lie, a carefully crafted defense strategy designed to make the jury sympathize with 2 cold-blooded killers, and they had evidence to support it. The prosecution presented several pieces of evidence that seemed to contradict the abuse claims. No medical records. Despite claims of years of sexual abuse, there were no medical records, no doctor visits, no physical evidence. 2. No prior reports. Neither Lyle nor Erik had ever reported the abuse to anyone before the murders. Not to teachers, counselors, friends, or family members. 3. The spending spree. After the murders, the brothers spent extravagantly. They showed no signs of trauma or grief. They partied, they traveled, they lived like millionaires. The brothers bought shotguns days before the murders. They drove to San Diego to purchase them to avoid being recognized. This showed premeditation, not a spontaneous act of self-defense. 5. The fake alibi. They told police they were at the movies watching Batman, but they had bought the tickets earlier and left them in the car to establish an alibi. The prosecution argued, these are not the actions of abuse victims. These are the actions of calculated killers. But then the defense presented witnesses who had seen something was wrong with the Menendez family, and their testimony was impossible to ignore. The defense called multiple witnesses who testified about Jose Menendez's behavior and the family dynamics. Dr. Jerome Ozalo, psychologist. Erik had confessed the murders to Dr. Ozil, but in those sessions, he also detailed the abuse. Dr. Ozil testified that Erik's descriptions were consistent with genuine trauma, not fabrication. Diane Vander Molen, Lyle's cousin, testified that when Lyle was 8 years old, he told her that his father was touching him. She told Kitty Menendez. Kitty's response, what happens in this family stays in this family. Erik's cousin testified that Erik had told him about the ongoing abuse months before the murders. Andy said Erik was terrified and didn't know what to do. Glenn Stevens, friend. A friend of Lyle's testified that Lyle had emotional breakdowns and talked about his father being cruel and controlling. Psychological experts. Multiple psychologists testified that both brothers showed classic signs of PTSD from long-term abuse. Their behavior after the murders, the spending, the denial, was consistent with trauma response, not celebration. These witnesses painted a picture of a family in crisis, a father who was controlling and possibly abusive, a mother who enabled it, and 2 sons who felt trapped. One of the most painful parts of the trial was the examination of Kitty Menendez's role. Both brothers testified that their mother knew about the abuse. Erik, I told my mom what dad was doing when I was 11. She said I was exaggerating. She told me to stop lying. Lyle, my mother caught my father with Erik once. She screamed at my father, but nothing changed. She never protected us. The defense argued that Kitty was complicit through her silence, that she chose to protect her marriage and her lifestyle over her son's safety. But the prosecution countered. Kitty Menendez is dead. She cannot defend herself, and these accusations are coming from the men who killed her. Kitty's family was divided. Some believed the brothers. Others were furious. Kitty's sister, Joan Vander Molen, testified for the defense. I believe Lyle and Erik. I know my sister had problems. She drank. She was depressed. And Jose was controlling. I believe something terrible was happening in that house. But Kitty's brother, Milton Anderson, testified for the prosecution. This is a character assassination of my dead sister. Kitty loved her boys. She would never let anyone hurt them. These are lies. The jury was left to decide. Was Kitty a victim or an enabler? And then came the moment that would define the entire trial. Erik broke down on the stand and revealed the final secret, the one that made them believe they had to kill that night. The critical question in the trial was, why August 20th, 1989? Why that specific night? The prosecution argued it was about money. Jose had threatened to change his will, but the defense told a different story. Erik testified, a week before it happened, I told Lyle that the abuse was still going on. Lyle confronted our father. He demanded it stop. And my father said, I'll do whatever I want, and if you tell anyone, I'll kill you both, Lyle testified. I saw the look in my father's eyes. He wasn't joking. He meant it. Erik and I talked. We were terrified. We thought he was going to kill us to keep us quiet. According to their testimony, they believed they had two choices: do nothing and possibly be killed. Kill their parents first. They chose option 2. Leslie Abramson argued this was imperfect self-defense. The brothers genuinely believed their lives were in danger, even if that belief was unreasonable. But the prosecution argued, if they were really in danger, why didn't they go to police? Why didn't they leave? Because they weren't in danger. They were greedy. January 1994. The first trial ended. The jury deliberated for weeks. They watched the testimony again. They reviewed the evidence. They debated, and they couldn't reach a verdict. Hung jury. Half the jury believed the abuse story and wanted to convict the brothers of manslaughter, not murder. Half the jury didn't believe them and wanted first-degree murder convictions. A mistrial was declared. America was divided exactly like that jury. Some people believed Lyle and Erik were abuse victims who snapped under years of trauma. Others believed they were greedy sociopaths who invented an abuse story to escape justice. The retrial began in 1995. This time, the judge restricted how much abuse testimony could be presented. The brothers were convicted of first-degree murder, but the question remained: were they telling the truth about the abuse? For 30 years, that question haunted the case, until 2023, when new evidence emerged that nobody saw coming. May 2023. A documentary titled Menendez plus Menudo, Boys Betrayed, was released. In it, Roy Rosselló, a former member of the 1980s boy band Menudo, made a shocking allegation. Jose Menendez raped me when I was 13 years old. Roy described how Jose, who worked at RCA Records, which signed Menudo, invited him to his home. What happened there matched exactly what Lyle and Erik had described. This was independent corroboration. Additionally, a letter was discovered, written by Erik to his cousin Andy Cano in December 1988, 8 months before the murders. The letter read, "I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy. I never know when it's going to happen. And it's worse now. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid." This letter had never been presented at the 1996 trial. Legal experts called it game-changing evidence. So after everything, the testimonies, the evidence, the new revelations, what's the truth? Arguments they were telling the truth. Roy Rosselló's independent allegation corroborates their story. Erik's 1988 letter shows he was discussing abuse before the murders. Multiple family members testified they knew something was wrong. Psychological experts confirmed their trauma symptoms were genuine. Their behavior patterns matched long-term abuse victims. Arguments they were lying. No medical evidence of abuse. Never reported it before the murders. The spending spree after seemed celebratory, not traumatic. They had opportunities to leave, but the murders were clearly premeditated. The complexity. Maybe both things are true. Maybe they were abused, and they murdered their parents for money. Maybe trauma doesn't excuse murder, but it explains it. Conclusion. The question that remains, 35 years later, we still don't have a definitive answer. Jose and Kitty Menendez are dead. They can't defend themselves or confirm the allegations. Lyle and Erik Menendez are in prison. They've spent 3 decades telling the same story. The new evidence suggests they were telling the truth about the abuse. But does that justify what they did? The trial forced America to confront uncomfortable questions. Can abuse victims also be murderers? Does trauma excuse violence? How do we balance justice for the dead with understanding for the damaged? Erik Menendez, in a 2017 interview, said, "I don't expect people to forgive me. I don't expect people to believe me. I just want people to know that we told the truth. My father hurt us, and we thought we had no other way out. We were wrong, and I'll spend the rest of my life wishing we had made a different choice." The Menendez case isn't just about 2 brothers who killed their parents. It's about the secrets families keep, the abuse that happens behind closed doors, and the impossible question, what do you do when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones hurting you? There's no easy answer, and maybe that's the most honest thing we can say about this case. The truth isn't always simple, and justice isn't always clear, but the questions matter, and the answers change everything.